Hi there. Since turning this channel into an art channel, I've often received comments about the possibility of a tutorial video. I figured that I should listen to these comments and properly explain my process of drawing trains. I can't promise that this will be the perfect tutorial or the optimal method for drawing pictures of trains, but I'm hoping that it will provide you with some decent pointers at the very least. And with that, it's time to make a start. This video will focus primarily on digital art since I'm more intimately familiar with this method comparing to drawing with traditional equipment. Although a lot of what I say will apply for both digital and traditional art. I'm also not going to focus too much on program-specific hotkeys, brushes or menus when explaining how to do something. Partially this is because Sketchbook's time-lapse feature doesn't allow those elements anyway, and also because you may be using another program like Procreate or Ibis Paint, which will have its own set of these things. Whilst I often dive in head first into the main drawing, it often helps to begin with a little thumbnail sketch in a corner of the screen so you can figure out the general layout and composition of your drawing ahead of time. So I'm going to do a thumbnail sketch. You'll notice that I've split the thumbnail into 9 squares, which is what is known as the rule of thirds. This is a type of composition template, one of several that have cropped up now and again on the channel, alongside the golden ratio and the golden triangle. Basically, you want to use these to make your artwork feel more balanced and to guide the viewer's eyes to specific elements of the drawing that you want them to focus on. You can download templates online for use in your artwork. You can place components of the art piece on the lines created by the rule of thirds. I've decided I want to draw Thomas next to a windmill, and so I'm going to align the windmill with the leftmost vertical line and Thomas with the vertical line on the right. Once you've done your thumbnail sketch, you can load the composition template into the scene. You want to make sure that the template is in its own separate layer, so once you've resized the template to fit the canvas, create a new layer in whatever software you're using. We now want to create a perspective guideline. You can find these by searching online if you don't want to draw this yourself, but all you really need to do is create a dot to represent the vanishing point, then draw straight lines originating from the dot at various angles. A lot of the time the vanishing point will not actually be on screen, as is the case for this drawing, so once I've drawn the vanishing point and its lines, I'll move the dot off screen and then extend the lines, making sure the trajectory is the same. With that, I'm going to lower the opacity of the perspective guidelines and make a new layer. Here, I'm going to make a cuboid, which is where Thomas will go. When drawing this, I found myself going back to the perspective guideline layer to add more lines to help me correctly plot the cuboid, so you may end up doing something similar, going back and forth between the layers until you're happy with the contents of both. I've also added some lines at the front of the cuboid, which will represent the gauge of the wheels and the track. After this, I've drawn 2 lines which will become the tracks themselves, along with lines that will represent the sleepers. Ideally, this should be a whole new set of perspective guidelines. You should be able to achieve something similar by duplicating the perspective guidelines you've already drawn and mirroring them, which will make things easier. I'm going to draw the windmill and some very basic scenery. I'm not going to go crazy with the scenery since the main point of the video is about drawing trains, so aside from the windmill we've just got some shrubs and hills in the background. Before drawing the engine of your choice, you'll want some reference material. Photos are always good. You'll probably want at least 2 reference photos of the engine so you have an idea on how it looks from multiple angles. If you have a model you can view from all angles, whether it be physical or digital, then that's even better. One program I think is quite a useful tool for drawing trains is Shape Viewer, a program for viewing Microsoft Train Simulator models. You don't actually need MSTS to run this program though. You can download a locomotive mod for the game, extract the content into any old folder, and then load the models using Shape Viewer. Traditionally, the main resource of British MSTS mods was UK Train Sim. That site is now shut down, although the majority of its backlog can be found on archive.org. The main disadvantage is that nothing is named, so I can't guarantee that you'll be able to find the engine you're after. Shape Viewer was a useful reference for when I was drawing Buck and Jumper. I had to draw the engines at a high-ish angle and almost but not quite front view. It was hard to depict them decently at that angle, and so I loaded a model of a buck jumper into Shape Viewer to get the right sort of angle, and that made things much easier. The main downside of Shape Viewer is that a lot of the MSTS engine mods are quite low poly and not overly detailed. Many of them are over 20 years old after all, and so whilst I recommend using the program to get the general shape of an engine, you should probably still use reference photos for finer details. I'm now going to lower the transparency of the layers. You'll notice that up until this point I've used a green pencil for everything. I can't remember exactly where this started for me, but I like to pencil the background details in green and the main focal point in blue. So with that I'm going to create a new layer, change the pencil colour to blue, and begin drawing Thomas, starting with the wheels. Because this is a perspective drawing, I haven't drawn the wheels as perfect circles, but instead as ovals. By drawing lines that match the trajectory of the sleepers, I know where the wheels on the far side should be in relation to the near side. Now I'm using the cuboid to let me know how wide the running board should be. A lot of engines, Thomas included, have raised or lowered sections of their running board, so it's good to study the reference images to keep check of the exact shape the running board takes. When it comes to drawing steam engines, a lot of the main components are just basic 3D shapes, so if you know how to draw them, it's somewhat straightforward to draw a steam engine. Smoke boxes, boilers and funnels are all cylinders, whereas tanks, cabs and tenders are essentially cuboids, sometimes multiple cuboids. Due to the perspective, the end of Thomas's splasher isn't directly above his wheel. This is to show that the width of the splashers is wider than the width between Thomas's wheels. If you were to view Thomas from exactly side on, his splasher would be directly above the front wheel, but if you were to view him from a 3/4 view, there would be a bit of distance between the two. Once you've got the basic shape down, you can draw the engine's face, assuming the engine in your drawing has one. I've drawn a horizontal line and a vertical line where the face will go. Now when you're drawing a human face, that central horizontal line is where the eyes should go. But when it comes to Thomas characters, it's the nose, not the eyes, that are in the middle. As such, the section where the two lines meet is where I'll be drawing Thomas's nose. Once the pencil lines are all done, we can move on to colouring. The first thing I'll do is change the background colour from white to lightish blue colour. Keeping the background pure white isn't advised, as it will make other colours appear darker than they actually are. I'm going to have the background be primarily blue anyway, since that's the colour I want the sky to be. Then I'm going to create a new layer underneath the background pencil lines, where I shall colour the background. By drawing underneath the pencil layer, I can still see the pencil lines at all times. The paint won't cover them up. As I mentioned in my drawing knockoff figurines video, I like to colour the background first when I draw train art. Like I said before, I'm not necessarily focusing on the background for this video, so we'll keep it simple. You might notice in the top right hand corner of the canvas that I've drawn some lines. This is going to be my light source. This way I'll know what direction the light is coming from, and thus where to add the highlights and shading. You'll notice that the base of the windmill is lighter towards the right and darker on the left. Time to add the ballast, rails and sleepers. Since we've drawn the pencil lines for the sleepers, it should be straightforward to add them, following the trajectory of the pencil lines. We now want another new layer in which I draw the main part of Thomas's body. I'm going to use different layers for the blue parts, the black parts like the smokebox and funnel, the grey parts such as the buffers and top of the running board, and the red parts such as the lining as well as the front and sides of the running board. I will start by drawing the outline of the blue part of Thomas's body and using the fill bucket to colour it in. Once we've done that, we can create a new layer directly on top of the one we've just been drawing on and make it a clipping mask. This way we can draw over the layer underneath, but we will only be able to affect the contents of the layer underneath without going outside. I can't overestimate how useful the clipping mask is. Due to where I've placed the light source, I know that the side of Thomas's tank will be lighter in colour than the front, which will be lighter than the underside as seen above his splasher. Because the sun is yellow, the highlights on Thomas's tank should be closer to yellow on the colour wheel versus his base colour. Since I've chosen a medium blue for Thomas, the highlights will not only be lighter but closer to yellow, making the highlight colour more of a cyan or a turquoise. Conversely, the darker shades will be further away from yellow on the colour wheel, making them closer to a dark purple. You'll also notice that I'm adding much lighter highlights to the edges of Thomas's tank and splasher. This is something you'll see on most cuboid or prism-shaped objects in real life, since it's rare for a 3D shape to not have any sort of bevel or roundness between two sides or faces. Speaking of faces, I'm adding some line work to Thomas's face. I tend to be careful with regards to how much of the face details I translate into line work, since, as you'll eventually see, I like to add a lot of shading to the face, and some of the detail will come from there. Again, I'm using the light source as a guide for how I should shade the face. The right hand side, or his left hand side, is brighter because it's closer to the light source, whereas parts that the light will have a hard time reaching, such as under his nose, mouth and the far side of his face, I've coloured darker. The next part is fairly straightforward. I make a new layer for the red parts of Thomas, such as his running board, stripes and side lining. Again, I'm creating a clipping mask to make the shading process just that little bit easier. After adding some extra detail such as his whistle, number and the lining around his cab windows, it's time for his chassis. Generally, I don't add a huge amount of detail when it comes to the chassis. I use a large paintbrush to block in the general shape. Then, on a separate layer, I colour the wheels. Often I find that less is more when it comes to drawing the wheels. Generally, any given light source won't light up the entirety of the wheels, and so when I draw the wheels they won't reach the bottom of the running board, since that area is less likely to receive any light at all. I'll add the wheel spokes, footsteps and counterweights. On a separate layer I'll change to a grey colour to draw the steel tyres and the side rods. The side rod should be on the opposite end of the wheels compared to the counterweight. And with that, there's not much more to do. I've added some steam coming out of Thomas's funnel, and a shadow. You want the shadow to appear in the opposite direction to the light source. Ideally you should draw it in a new layer underneath all of the engine's layers, but above the background. I've made the shadow a very dark purple colour, since the sun is yellow and purple is on the opposite side to yellow in the colour wheel. You want to avoid using pure black as often as you can, since black will make dark colours duller and less saturated, whereas a dark purple will keep things colourful. And with that, we're basically done. I hope this guide was of some use to you if you're hoping to get into drawing trains, and if you aren't, then I hope this video was entertaining all the same. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you're interested in seeing what I've got in store for next week, be sure to subscribe.